The sun beat down mercilessly on Fort Shepherd that July afternoon in 2022, the Arizona heat turning the firing range into a shimmering mirage. This wasn't just any military installation. Fort Shepherd stood as a living monument to America's silent warriors, those who had fought battles that would never make history books. In the armory's fluorescent glow stood Sarah Reeves, 35, 5'7", with unremarkable brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun. To casual observers, she was nothing more than another cog in the military's vast machine. Just a logistics specialist with a clipboard counting bullets and recording serial numbers with methodical precision. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency over an M4A1 SOP Ahmad Block 2, checking the serial number against her inventory list. She handled the weapon with a familiarity that went beyond mere inventory procedure, though no one was watching closely enough to notice. "Reeves, we need 40 more boxes of 5.56 for tomorrow's qualification," barked a passing sergeant, not bothering to wait for acknowledgement. Sarah nodded without looking up. "Already prepped, Sergeant. They're staged in range control." The sergeant paused momentarily, surprised by her efficiency, before continuing without a word of thanks. Sarah didn't expect one. In her 3 years at Fort Shepherd, she had perfected the art of invisibility, competent enough to avoid negative attention, unremarkable enough to escape scrutiny. As she moved deeper into the armory, her hand lingered briefly over an M14 rifle, the iconic weapon of an earlier era of American warfare. Unlike the modern tactical equipment surrounding it, the M14 was a relic from another time, speaking to battles fought in jungles and frozen mountains decades ago. "Beautiful piece, isn't it?" The voice came from behind her, carrying the weight of authority. Sarah turned to find Colonel Robert Hayes watching her with thoughtful eyes. At 62, Hayes was an anachronism in today's Army, a living connection to an era of shadowy conflicts. The 3 stars on his collar represented not just rank, but a lifetime dedicated to battles fought far from public view. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, her voice neutral. "Just completing inventory." Hayes nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. The M14, not as flashy as what the kids use these days, but when that 7.62 connects, it leaves no doubt. He ran his hand along the wooden stock. "You know, in Berlin back in '89, we had a modified version of this. Cut down the stock, added a suppressor that worked worth a damn in the cold. Made all the difference when things got complicated." Sarah nodded politely, but something in her posture shifted, a barely perceptible tension. Hayes didn't miss it. He hadn't survived 3 decades of covert operations by overlooking details. "Carry on, specialist," he said finally. As he walked away, Sarah felt his assessment lingering in the air between them. Outside, the range buzzed with activity as Fort Shepherd's elite marksmanship instructors prepared for qualification trials. Among them, Master Sergeant William Bull Donovan's voice carried across the grounds, his imposing 6'3" frame backing up the authority in his tone. At 44, with 3 combat tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, Donovan had earned both his nickname and the respect it commanded. "Jenkins, if you can't adjust for that crosswind at 300 yards, you might as well be throwing rocks," he bellowed at a young ranger. "The Taliban won't send you a text message when they change positions." As Sarah crossed the parade ground toward the administrative building, she passed Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell, emerging from the officers' quarters. At 58, Mitchell carried himself with the coiled alertness of a veteran of special operations. As Deputy Commander for Security, Mitchell's responsibility was ensuring that Fort Shepherd's secrets stayed exactly that, secret. "Reeves," he called out, his voice carrying the flat neutrality of a man used to interrogations. Sarah stopped, turning with perfect military precision. "Sir, you were in the Secure Communications building last night, after hours." Not a question, but an accusation. "Yes, sir. Colonel Hayes requested updated inventory reports on the Phase 4 equipment. The system was down during regular hours." Her response came without hesitation, her eyes meeting his directly. Mitchell studied her for a long moment before nodding curtly. "Next time, ensure your access is logged properly. Security protocols exist for a reason." "Won't happen again, sir." As she continued on her way, Sarah could feel Mitchell's eyes tracking her movement. Unlike other soldiers who barely registered her presence, Mitchell seemed to see something that warranted his attention. It was exactly the kind of scrutiny she had carefully avoided for 3 years. Inside the administrative building, as Sarah moved through the quiet hallways with the confidence of someone who belonged. Her workstation was unremarkable, a standard-issue desk in a room shared with three other support personnel. She logged into her computer, her fingers moving swiftly as she updated inventory records. But as the afternoon wore on, her gaze occasionally drifted to the window overlooking the sniper qualification range, where Donovan was now running a group of advanced students through precision shooting drills. Admiring the view, Reeves. The voice belonged to Specialist Thomas Chen, another logistics officer who occupied the desk across from hers. Bit above our pay grade out there, isn't it? Sarah smiled politely. Just taking a break from spreadsheets. Chen shrugged. Next week's the Eagle Sharp competition. Best snipers in the Army coming to show off. Heard Donovan's been unbearable about it, determined that his guys sweep the podium. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind her eyes. Is that right? Yeah, even got some of the old Cold Warriors coming out of retirement to watch. Hayes has been talking it up. Apparently reminds him of some hush-hush competition against the Soviets back in the day. As the day drew to a close, Sarah completed her final reports and shut down her workstation. The sun was setting over the distant mountains, painting the desert in hues of orange and red. She walked unhurriedly toward the enlisted quarters, her posture relaxed and unremarkable. But instead of entering the building, she continued past it, making her way to a seldom-used storage facility at the edge of the base. After confirming she wasn't observed, she entered using her security credentials and moved to a locked cabinet in the rear. From beneath a stack of technical manuals, she retrieved a secure satellite phone, untraceable and unconnected to any military network. She dialed a number from memory and waited. Verification, came a voice deliberately distorted. Weather in Dresden is always unpredictable in autumn. She replied, her voice now carrying a confidence absent in her daytime persona. Acknowledged report. Eagle Sharp competition next week. Hayes Mitchell and most of the command staff will be present. Additionally, several retired operators with Cold War experience in attendance. And Project Echo, Sarah's expression hardened. Still secure, but Mitchell is increasing security protocols. He's suspicious. Of you specifically. Uncertain. He's watching everyone with access to the secure areas. There was a pause on the other end. The timetable may need acceleration. You have the necessary skills to complete this alone if required. Understood. Shamant. Sarah ended the call, disassembled the phone, and returned the components to their hiding places. As she exited the storage facility, her posture shifted once again. Her shoulders slightly rounded, gaze lowered, the invisible logistics specialist returning to her unremarkable existence. Back in her quarters, Sarah performed her nightly routine with the same efficiency that characterized all her actions. But as the base quieted around her, she removed a worn photograph from beneath her mattress. A team of operators standing before a helicopter. Among them stood a much younger Robert Hayes. Sarah studied the image with an unreadable expression before returning it to its hiding place. Whatever game was being played at Fort Shepherd, the pieces were now in motion, and Sarah Reeves was clearly more than the administrative specialist she appeared to be. The next morning dawned with the same relentless heat. In his office, Colonel Robert Hayes stood at the window watching the daily routine of Fort Shepherd unfold. His office walls bore no photographs, no mementos, nothing that would reveal the true nature of his service. Behind him, a secure computer terminal displayed a file that officially didn't exist. An after-action report from Berlin, 1989, with most paragraphs blacked out under heavy redaction. What remained visible was sparse but significant. Extraction compromised, surrounded by Stasi, unexpected support from position designated Atlas, 7 confirmed eliminations at range exceeding 800 meters, shooter designated Athena, identity unknown even to team members. Hayes closed the file and cleared the screen, his mind traveling back to that frozen night when his team had been moments from capture. They had been extracting a high-level defector from East Berlin when the operation had been betrayed from within. His team, outnumbered and outgunned, had prepared for a final stand when the night erupted with the precise crack of a sniper rifle. 7 shots, 7 kills, each one perfectly placed from a position that should have been impossible given the weather conditions. His team had never discovered who had saved them that night. The shooter had vanished like a ghost, leaving only brass casings cooling in the snow. A knock at the door pulled Hayes from his memories. Enter. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell stepped in, closing the door behind him. His expression was grim, his posture communicating urgency. "We have a situation, sir." Hayes gestured to a chair. "Proceed." Mitchell remained standing. "Our routine security sweep flagged anomalous access patterns in the Echo Wing database. Someone's been pulling technical schematics, slowly, carefully over the past 3 months." Hayes's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "Do we have confirmation of data exfiltration?" "Nothing conclusive yet. Whoever's doing this knows our monitoring systems intimately." Mitchell placed a file on Hayes's desk. "I've narrowed the potential access points to these terminals." Hayes opened the file, scanning the list. His gaze paused on one particular entry. "Specialist Reeves has legitimate access for inventory purposes." "Yes, sir, but her access frequency exceeds normal parameters for her duties." Hayes studied Mitchell carefully. "What's your assessment, James?" Mitchell's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Reeves's background checks are immaculate. Too immaculate. 27 months ago, she transferred from Fort Benning with stellar recommendations. Everything in perfect order." "And that bothers you?" "In 30 years of service, I've never seen a file so clean it squeaks." Mitchell leaned forward slightly. "No disciplinary issues, no personal problems, no financial concerns. She's a ghost, sir." Hayes nodded slowly. "The Eagle Sharp competition begins Monday. Every critical person on this base will be focused there." "Including us," Mitchell confirmed. "It would provide ideal cover for whatever they're planning." Hayes stood, moving to a wall safe concealed behind a tactical map. He entered a complex combination from memory retrieving, a red-bordered folder with classified markings so old they belonged to a system no longer in use. He placed it on his desk, out of Mitchell's direct line of sight. "Increased security on Project Echo." Discreetly. "I want to know exactly what they're after before we move." Mitchell nodded. "And Reeves?" Hayes's expression remained inscrutable. "Continue monitoring. No direct action yet." After Mitchell departed, Hayes opened the classified folder. Inside were photographs of a special operations team, women not men, dressed in tactical gear from the mid-1980s. The operation name was stamped across the top, Project Artemis. Hayes studied one face in particular, comparing it mentally with Specialist Sarah Reeves. 30 years had passed, but some features didn't change. The set of the eyes, the angle of the jaw. He closed the folder, his decision made. Whatever game was being played at Fort Shepherd, Hayes was now certain he knew at least some of the players. That afternoon, Sarah moved through her duties with characteristic efficiency, cataloging a shipment of advanced optics for the sniper teams. Through the windows, she could see increased patrols near the Echo Wing, subtle enough that most wouldn't notice, but obvious to someone trained to detect such changes. Mitchell was tightening security, which meant he suspected something. The question was whether he suspected her specifically or was simply being cautious. As she passed the sniper training range, Master Sergeant Donovan noticed her and straightened his expression, shifting from focused instruction to mild contempt. "Taking the scenic route, Reeves," he called out, "or just admiring what real soldiers do?" Several of his trainees chuckled, comfortable in the hierarchy that placed support personnel firmly below combat specialists. Sarah stopped, turning to face him with a neutral expression. "Just delivering updated inventory reports for the competition equipment, Sergeant." Donovan approached, towering over her 5'7" frame. Up close, the scars from his combat tours were visible. A thin white line across his left cheek, from shrapnel burn marks on his forearms, from a vehicle extraction gone wrong in Kandahar. "Hope you counted everything twice. My boys need the best for Eagle Sharp." He gestured to the range behind him. "Going to show these youngsters what real marksmanship looks like." Sarah nodded respectfully. "I'm sure they'll perform admirably under your guidance, Sergeant." Something in her tone made Donovan study her more carefully. "You know anything about shooting Reeves besides checking boxes on inventory forms?" Before she could respond, a voice interrupted from behind them. "Specialist Reeves has an excellent grasp of ballistic principles. Her inventory work reflects that understanding." They turned to find Colonel Hayes approaching, his calm authority immediately shifting the dynamic. "Sir," Donovan acknowledged with a crisp salute. Hayes returned it casually. "How's the team looking, bull ready to maintain our reputation?" Donovan straightened with pride. "Absolutely, sir. These boys will show the other units what Fort Shepherd is made of." Hayes nodded, his gaze moving between Donovan and Sarah with calculated assessment. Eagle Sharp isn't just about speed or accuracy, it's about judgment under pressure. The ability to make impossible shots when everything is working against you. He paused, his eyes settling on Sarah. Isn't that right, specialist? Sarah met his gaze evenly. That's my understanding, sir. The Soviets understood that. Hayes continued addressing Donovan, but watching Sarah's reaction. Back in 80, we had an unofficial competition with their best at a remote site in Norway. NATO exercise providing cover. Their top shooter was a woman. Barely 5'5", looked like she should be teaching school somewhere. She outshot every operator we brought. Donovan frowned. Different era, sir. Standards have evolved. Have they? Hayes's expression remained neutral, but his eyes held a challenge. Or do we just tell ourselves that to feel better about our assumptions? The comment hung in the air, creating an uncomfortable silence that Sarah broke by gesturing to the administrative building. If you'll excuse me, sir, I need to file these reports. Hayes nodded. Carry on, specialist. As Sarah walked away, she could feel both men watching her. Donovan with newfound curiosity, Hayes with something far more complex. The colonel was testing her, probing for reactions that would confirm what he already suspected. The question was why he hadn't acted on those suspicions yet. That evening, as the base settled into its nighttime routine, Sarah performed a casual circuit of the perimeter running path, standard exercise that wouldn't draw attention. As she rounded the eastern perimeter, she noticed Hayes sitting alone on a bench overlooking the darkened firing range. Beautiful night for contemplation, isn't it, specialist? He called as she approached. She paused, coming to a natural stop. Yes, sir. Clear skies. Hayes gestured to the space beside him. Join me for a moment. It wasn't a request. Sarah sat maintaining appropriate distance between them. 3 years at Fort Shepherd, Hayes remarked, looking out over the darkened landscape. Exemplary service record. Never a complaint, never a mistake. The perfect soldier. Sarah remained silent, recognizing the statement for what it was. The opening move in a dangerous game. Hayes continued, his voice taking on a reflective quality. In 1989, my team was compromised in East Berlin. Surrounded by Stasi agents, no extraction possible. We prepared to take as many with us as we could before the inevitable. He turned, studying her profile in the moonlight. And then a miracle. 7 shots from an impossible position. 7 Stasi officers eliminated with surgical precision. The desert night was silent around them, the only sound the distant call of a coyote. We never identified the shooter, Hayes continued. Codename Athena. Part of a program even I wasn't cleared to know about. Female operators trained for deep cover and high-value eliminations. Project Artemis. Sarah's posture remained neutral, but her breathing quickened almost imperceptibly. Why are you telling me this, sir? Hayes smiled, a small knowing expression. Because tomorrow begins the Eagle Sharp competition. The best snipers in the Army will be here, along with visiting brass and former operators. Everyone who matters at Fort Shepherd focused on one location. He paused. Perfect timing for someone with ulterior motives. Sarah turned to face him directly. Are you accusing me of something, Colonel? Not accusing, recognizing. Hayes's eyes held hers steadily. I've spent 50 years in service to this country, Specialist Reeves. I've seen enemies become allies, allies become enemies. The only constant is that nothing is ever quite what it appears to be. He stood straightening his uniform with the unconscious precision of decades of military discipline. Whatever's happening at Fort Shepherd, whatever Project Echo truly represents, just remember that not all weapons from that era should be resurrected. Some technologies were locked away for good reason. With that, he walked away, leaving Sarah alone on the bench, the weight of his words hanging in the desert air. The message was clear. Hayes knew, or strongly suspected, her true identity. Yet instead of exposing her, he had chosen to issue a warning. As she resumed her run, Sarah processed this new development. Hayes was playing his own game, separate from Mitchell's more direct approach. The question was whether he was an asset to be leveraged or another obstacle to be overcome. Back in her quarters, Sarah secured the door and performed a thorough sweep for surveillance devices. Finding none, she removed a false bottom from her footlocker and retrieved a satellite phone different from the one she'd used previously. When the connection established, the voice that answered was female, older, caring authority earned through decades of covert operations. Report. Sarah's voice shifted, dropping the deferential tone of Specialist Reeves and adopting the clipped precision of a veteran operative. Hayes knows. He referenced Artemis directly. A pause. Assessment. He's warning me, not threatening. Mitchell is increasing security on Echo Wing. They know something's coming, but not what or exactly when. Your cover. Intact officially, but compromised in practice. Hayes recognized me, or someone similar enough to make the connection. Another pause, longer this time. The competition tomorrow provides optimal conditions. We're moving the timetable forward. Eagle Sharp will provide necessary cover. Understood. Parameters. Verification only. No extraction yet. We need confirmation of what they're storing before proceeding. And if intervention becomes necessary, the voice hardened, then you remember your training, Athena. Project Echo cannot be allowed to resurface after all these years. Whatever the cost. The call ended. Sarah disassembled the phone, her movements precise and economical. As she prepared for bed, her mind cataloged the variables, calculating probabilities, and planning contingencies. Tomorrow would bring Fort Shepherd's Eagle Sharp competition, a gathering of the best military marksmen in the country. And perhaps, though none of them yet realized it, the resurrection of a Cold War ghost named Athena. The morning of the Eagle Sharp competition dawned with a clarity that snipers prized. Low humidity, minimal wind, perfect visibility across the sprawling range complex. Fort Shepherd hummed with the controlled energy of a military installation on display, with teams from Army Special Forces Rangers and specialized sniper units arriving in measured procession. In the women's barracks, Sarah Reeves prepared for the day with the same methodical precision that characterized all her actions. Her uniform was immaculate, her appearance regulation perfect. The invisible support specialist preparing for another day of administrative duties. But beneath that carefully constructed exterior, her mind was mapping the day's objectives with tactical precision. Sarah's assigned position was at the scorekeeping station, where she would record and verify results as they came in. A perfect vantage point to observe both the competition and the command staff without drawing attention. As she set up her workstation, Master Sergeant Donovan approached with his team of 6 snipers, men whose faces showed the focused intensity of elite competitors. "Systems check out, Reeves." Donovan asked, his tone professional, but underlined with the familiar dismissiveness he reserved for support personnel. "Yes, Sergeant, all calibrated and verified." Donovan nodded, then paused, studying her with newfound curiosity after yesterday's interaction with Colonel Hayes. "You ever shoot competitively, Specialist?" Sarah's response was measured, revealing nothing. "Basic marksmanship only, Sergeant. Nothing at this level." One of Donovan's snipers, Jenkins, a lanky Texan with 3 confirmed kills in Afghanistan, smirked. "Bit different from shooting paper targets at 25 meters, ma'am. At 1,000 yards, you're calculating for wind vectors, humidity, barometric pressure, even the Coriolis effect." Sarah nodded respectfully. "Sounds complicated." "It's not just math," Jenkins continued. "It's instinct, feeling the shot before you take it. That's why they call it an art form." Donovan cut him off with a gesture. "Save the lecture, Jenkins. Ms. Reeves has scorecards to prepare." He turned back to Sarah. "We'll be zeroing on range 2 if you need anything verified." By mid-morning, the competition was in full swing, with the first relay of shooters engaging targets at 600 yards. The crack of precision rifles echoed across the range in disciplined intervals, each shot followed by the electronic confirmation of its placement. Distinguished visitors watched from the shaded viewing area, including generals from the Pentagon and several retired operators, whose presence spoke to the prestige of the event. Colonel Hayes moved among these guests with the practiced ease of a host, but his eyes regularly scanned the range with the alertness of a man who never truly relaxed. Occasionally, his gaze would find Sarah at her scoring station, lingering just long enough to convey unspoken understanding before moving on. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell was less subtle in his surveillance, positioning himself where he could observe both the competition and Sarah simultaneously. His security teams maintained their patrols with increased vigilance, their communications equipment regularly checking in with updates from around the base. As the morning progressed, the competition intensified. Donovan's team performed admirably, with Jenkins particularly distinguished in the moving target challenge. The specialized electronic targets recorded shot placements with ruthless precision, the scoreboard updating in real time as competitors advanced through increasingly difficult scenarios. During a brief intermission as teams prepared for the advanced stages, Colonel Hayes approached the scoring station where Sarah worked. "How are we looking, specialist?" he asked, his voice carrying for the benefit of those nearby. "Fort Shepherd's team is leading by 3 points, sir," Sarah replied, maintaining her professional demeanor. "Sergeant Jenkins has the highest individual score." Hayes nodded, then lowered his voice. "Impressive shooting, though I've seen better." His eyes held hers for a meaningful moment before he continued at normal volume. "Make sure the wind flags are checked before the 1,000-yard competition. Conditions are shifting." "Yes, sir." As Hayes moved away, Sarah noticed Mitchell watching their interaction with focused intensity. The game would be becoming more complex, with Hayes seemingly playing both sides of whatever scenario was unfolding. The afternoon brought the most challenging event, extreme distance shooting at 1,000 yards with variable wind conditions. The desert heat had created unpredictable thermal currents, forcing shooters to read mirage effects through their scopes and adjust accordingly. Even the most experienced competitors found their skills tested to the limit. As Jenkins prepared for his final shot in the competition, the one that would likely secure Fort Shepherd's victory, Donovan approached Sarah's station, his expression tense with competitive focus. "Wind reading," he demanded. Sarah checked the electronic sensors. 7 miles per hour gusting to 12, 45-degree angle from the northeast. Donovan frowned. "Sensors must be off. Doesn't match what I'm seeing in the mirage." Sarah hesitated, then made a decision that would alter the course of events. "The sensors are calibrated at 6 feet above ground level. At rifle height, you're likely getting different readings due to the terrain effect. There's a thermal barrier forming about 4 feet up." Donovan looked at her sharply, its surprise evident in his expression. "That's unusually specific analysis, specialist." Sarah maintained her professional demeanor. "Just an observation based on the data, Sergeant." Donovan studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I'll relay that to Jenkins." He paused, then added with reluctant acknowledgement, "Good catch." As Donovan returned to his team, Sarah could see him speaking intensely to Jenkins, who adjusted his scope settings accordingly. When Jenkins fired his final shot, it struck dead center, despite wind conditions that should have pushed it off target. The electronic scoreboard registered a perfect hit, securing Fort Shepherd's victory. The crowd erupted in applause, but Sarah's attention was drawn to Colonel Hayes, who was watching her rather than the celebration. His expression conveyed a complex message, part acknowledgement, part warning. As the competitors and spectators moved toward the awards ceremony, Mitchell approached Sarah's station, his manner casual but his eyes alert. "Interesting observation about the wind conditions, Specialist Reeves. Not something I'd expect from administrative personnel." Sarah organized her scoring sheets with methodical precision. "My father was a meteorologist, sir. Some things you pick up growing up." Mitchell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Is that so? Funny your file lists your father as a high school physics teacher." The trap was sprung so casually that a less experienced operative might have reacted visibly. Sarah's heart raced, but years of training kept her exterior calm as she met Mitchell's gaze evenly. "He taught physics after retiring from the National Weather Service, sir. Career changes aren't uncommon." Mitchell nodded slowly, accepting the explanation while clearly not believing it. "No, they certainly aren't. People reinvent themselves all the time, don't they? Specialist?" Before Sarah could respond, a commotion erupted near the awards podium. Master Sergeant Donovan's voice carried across the range, his tone challenging. "I said my team earned this victory fair and square." The dispute appeared to involve one of the visiting teams questioning Fort Shepherd's final score. As security personnel moved toward the confrontation, Mitchell hesitated, torn between continuing his interrogation of Sarah and addressing the potential incident. "We'll continue this discussion later, Specialist," he said, finally moving toward the disturbance. Sarah remained at her station, outwardly calm but inwardly alert. The argument was escalating, drawing attention and security resources exactly as needed. Whether coincidental or orchestrated, it provided the diversion she required. With practiced casualness, she gathered her materials and moved away from the scoring station, her path taking her toward the administrative building, but angled to pass near the now less guarded approach to the Echo Wing. Her movements were unhurried, her expression reflecting nothing but professional focus on her duties. As she neared the junction where she would need to make her decision, continue to the administrative building on what's expected, or divert toward her true objective, she found her path suddenly blocked by Colonel Hayes. "Quite a controversy over there," Hayes remarked, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp, competitive spirit running high. "Yes, sir," Sarah agreed, maintaining her cover. "I should file these scoring records before they're requested for verification." Hayes studied her with the penetrating discipline of a man who had seen every form of deception across decades of covert operations. "You know, specialist, the most dangerous moments in any operation come when we believe we're closest to success." The statement hung between them. Not quite an accusation, not exactly a warning. Sarah met his gaze steadily, neither confirming nor denying the implication. "Sometimes," Hayes continued, his voice dropping so only she could hear, "the mission we think we're on isn't the one we're actually serving." Sarah felt a chill at his words. In their world of shadows and half-truths, Hayes was telling her something critical. But what? Before she could process the implications, Donovan's voice cut through their exchange, approaching from behind. "Colonel Hayes Reeves, you need to see this." They turned to find Donovan striding toward them, his face flushed with competitive pride. Behind him, Jenkins followed with the trophy for Fort Shepherd's victory, his expression beaming with accomplishment. "Perfect shot at 200 yards with variable crosswinds," Donovan declared. "Haven't seen shooting like that since—" He paused, glancing at Sarah with newfound curiosity. "Well, not from someone who hasn't spent years behind a scope." Hayes nodded appreciatively. "Excellent work, Sergeant. Fort Shepherd maintains its reputation." Donovan's focus remained on Sarah, however, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by puzzled reassessment. "That call on the thermal barrier was spot on, Reeves. Jenkins says he'd have missed without that adjustment." Sarah downplayed the observation with practiced modesty. "Just reporting what the data showed, Sergeant." "Bullshit," Donovan replied, the profanity carrying no malice but rather gruff respect. "That was shooter's intuition. You've handled a rifle before. Real experience, not just qualification courses." The moment stretched dangerously, with Hayes watching the exchange with calculated interest and Sarah maintaining her cover identity against direct challenge. The tension was broken by the sudden appearance of Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, his expression hard as he approached their group. "Colonel Hayes, we have a situation at the Echo Wing. Security Protocol Sigma is in effect." Hayes's demeanor shifted instantly from casual conversation to command authority. "Understood. Secure the range and begin accountability procedures." As Mitchell moved to implement these orders, Hayes turned to Sarah, his expression now unreadable. "Report to your duty station specialist. All personnel are restricted to designated areas until further notice." The subtext was clear. Whatever opportunity Sarah might have had to access the Echo Wing was now gone, the security breach, putting the entire base on heightened alert. Whether coincidence or calculated countermove, the development forced an immediate change in plans. "Yes, sir," she acknowledged, her mind already recalculating options. As security personnel began moving through the range complex, directing competitors and spectators to designated holding areas, Sarah made her way toward the administrative building as ordered. Her external demeanor remained calm and professional, but internally she processed the rapid shift in tactical situation. As Sarah reached the administrative building, alarms began sounding across Fort Shepherd, the distinctive pattern indicating a base-wide security lockdown. Whatever had been detected in the Echo Wing had escalated from concern to confirmed threat. Inside personnel moved with urgent purpose, implementing security protocols with practiced efficiency. Sarah took her assigned position, maintaining her cover while her mind worked through implications and possibilities. The carefully constructed operation was now compromised, forcing adaptation and reassessment. Through the window, she could see Mitchell organizing response teams, his expression grim with focused determination. Hayes stood apart, surveying the controlled chaos with the experienced eye of a commander who had seen similar scenarios unfold across decades of service. As their gazes met across the distance, an unspoken communication passed between them, a recognition that the true battle was just beginning. Whatever secrets Project Echo contained, whatever history lay buried in the classified archives of the Cold War, the ghosts of that era were now rising to the surface at Fort Shepherd. And Sarah Reeves, or whoever she truly was, stood at the center of a storm whose true nature had yet to reveal itself. The lockdown at Fort Shepherd stretched into evening, transforming the celebratory atmosphere of the Eagles' sharp competition into a tense military operation. Security teams moved through the base with methodical precision, checking identification and verifying locations of all personnel. In the administrative building's secure conference room, Sarah Reeves sat with other support personnel, maintaining her cover as they waited for the all-clear. Her posture was relaxed, showing appropriate concern, but none of the tension that might betray her true involvement. The door opened and Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell entered, his expression carved from stone. His eyes swept across the assembled support staff, lingering momentarily on Sarah before addressing the group. The security alert has been downgraded. All personnel are to return to quarters directly. No detours, no exceptions. His voice carried the hard edge of authority under pressure. Regular duties resume at 600 tomorrow. As the group began to disperse, Mitchell's voice cut through the movement. Specialist Reeves, a moment. Sarah remained behind as others filed out, her expression questioning but composed. When they were alone, Mitchell closed the door, standing between her and the exit with deliberate positioning. "We found something interesting during our security sweep," he said, his tone conversational, but his eyes hard as flint. "An unauthorized access attempt at the Echo Wing server room, very sophisticated, almost got past our countermeasures." Sarah maintained eye contact, her posture neutral. "I hope nothing was compromised, sir." "That's the interesting part." Mitchell moved closer, invading her personal space with calculated intimidation. "The attempt originated from a terminal registered to administration, your section." Sarah felt a trickle of adrenaline, but kept her breathing measured. This was unexpected. Someone else was moving against Echo Wing. "There are 12 terminals in that section, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady, "all with multiple authorized users." Mitchell nodded slowly. "Yes. And coincidentally, this attempt occurred precisely when everyone's attention was focused on the final moments of the competition, when you made that remarkably insightful observation about wind conditions." The accusation hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Are you suggesting I was involved, sir?" "I'm not suggesting anything yet, specialist." Mitchell's eyes narrowed slightly. "Just noting patterns, coincidences, like how your personnel file lists expertise in basic computer systems, yet your technical qualifications test scores are precisely 1 point below the threshold that would flag you for cyber operations training." Sarah remained silent, recognizing the trap and responding to such a specific observation. Mitchell continued, circling her position with predatory patience. "Or how your marksmanship qualifications are consistently average, never missing enough to require remedial training, never scoring high enough to draw attention." He stopped directly in front of her. "The perfect invisible soldier. Until today, when you demonstrated knowledge that even experienced snipers found impressive." Sarah allowed a flash of indignation to cross her features, the natural reaction of an accused innocent. "Sir, I made an observation based on sensor readings. If you're implying—" "I'm not implying anything, Specialist Reeves," Mitchell interrupted. "I'm informing you that you are now under heightened observation. Every move, every keystroke, every communication." He stepped back, opening the door to indicate the conversation was finished. "Report to your quarters, directly." Sarah nodded, moving past him with appropriate military deference. As she walked through the darkened base toward the enlisted quarters, she maintained awareness of her surroundings without obvious vigilance. Mitchell would have surveillance on her now, so both electronic and human. Any deviation from expected behavior would only confirm his suspicions. Inside her quarters, she performed her evening routine exactly as she had every night for 3 years. A practiced routine designed to establish normalcy. But her mind was calculating, rapidly assessing the changed operational parameters. The security breach at Echo Wing hadn't been part of her mission, which meant another player had entered the game. Someone else was after Project Echo's secrets. At precisely 0200 hours, when the guard rotation would create a momentary gap in surveillance coverage, Sarah moved. In darkness, she retrieved her satellite phone and typed a coded text message, a simple string of characters that would appear as random data to anyone intercepting it, but would signal her handler that standard communication protocols were compromised. Message sent. Sarah returned to her sleeping position. To any observer, she had simply shifted in her sleep. Now she could only wait, knowing that events had accelerated beyond the original mission parameters. Morning arrived with the harsh brilliance of the Arizona desert sun. Sarah performed her wake-up routine with military precision, preparing for the day ahead. As she crossed the parade ground toward the mess hall, she noted increased security personnel. Mitchell implementing his promised surveillance. At precisely 0900, Sarah arrived at Colonel Hayes's office, inventory reports in hand. The administrative building hummed with regular activity, the rhythms of military bureaucracy continuing despite the previous day's disruption. Hayes's aide, a sharp-eyed lieutenant, admitted her to the inner office with professional courtesy. Hayes sat behind his desk reviewing documents with focused attention that shifted to Sarah as the door closed behind her. The office was a reflection of its occupant, organized, functional, with nothing extraneous or revealing. "The inventory report, sir," Sarah said, placing the folder on his desk. Hayes nodded, opening the folder and scanning its contents. To any monitoring devices, they were simply reviewing mundane logistics documents. But as Hayes turned pages, he spoke in a voice pitched to avoid electronic surveillance. "The security breach yesterday wasn't your work," he stated with quiet certainty. "Professional, but not your signature. Different approach entirely." Sarah maintained her administrative specialist demeanor, pointing at figures on the report as she responded in equally measured tones. "That assessment seems accurate, sir." Hayes continued reviewing the documents, his eyes on the papers, but his attention fully on the conversation. Which raises the question, who else is hunting for Project Echo? And why now, after all these years? "Perhaps the inventory will reveal some anomalies, sir," Sarah replied, the double meaning clear. Hayes closed the folder, leaning back in his chair with the weariness of a man who had carried classified burdens for decades. Project Echo dates back to 1985, Operation Whispering Storm, a joint Soviet-American research initiative during a brief thaw in relations, biological research officially for defensive purposes only. He rose, moving to the window where electronic surveillance would be harder to distinguish his words from ambient noise. Both sides were lying, of course. The real goal was a pathogen that could target specific genetic markers, a weapon that could eliminate enemy leadership without affecting their own population. Sarah joined him at the window, standing at appropriate distance while ostensibly pointing out something on the parade ground. That research was supposedly terminated by mutual agreement in 1988. Officially, yes. Hayes's voice carried the weight of classified history. Unofficially, both sides continued. The Soviets had a breakthrough in early 1989, a delivery system codenamed Echo that could disperse the pathogen with unprecedented precision. But their lead scientist, Dr. Andrei Petrov, defected, bringing the prototype and research data. "The Berlin extraction," Sarah said softly, the pieces falling into place. Hayes nodded, his eyes distant with memory. "My team was tasked with bringing him out. The operation was betrayed from within our own ranks. We were surrounded, prepared for the worst when those 7 perfect shots changed everything." He turned to her, decades of unspoken history hanging between them. "Athena, the ghost shooter who vanished afterward, leaving no trace." Sarah met his gaze steadily, neither confirming nor denying her connection to that night so long ago. "And Project Echo remained at Fort Shepherd all these years." "In modified form," Hayes confirmed. "After the Soviet Union collapsed, we maintained the research as insurance against Russian hardliners who might have access to their version. The biological component was neutralized decades ago, but the delivery system remained. Too valuable to destroy, too dangerous to deploy." He returned to his desk, picking up the inventory folder with renewed purpose. And now suddenly, multiple parties are very interested in technology that hasn't been relevant since the Berlin Wall fell. "Perhaps something has changed, sir," Sarah suggested, maintaining the pretense of reviewing documents. "New applications for old technology." Hayes studied her with the penetrating assessment of a career intelligence officer. "Mitchell believes you're a foreign agent here to steal Echo for some hostile power, but that's not right, is it? You're American, always have been." The statement hung between them, a test and an offering simultaneously. Sarah responded with careful precision. "Loyalty can be complex, Colonel, especially when the mission spans decades." Hayes nodded slowly, understanding the layers of meaning. "Mitchell has scheduled a full security review of Echo Wing for 1400 hours. All senior personnel will be present. The perfect opportunity for someone to access the facility through the maintenance tunnels that don't appear on current base schematics. He handed the folder back to Sarah, his expression unreadable. Make sure these figures are updated in the system immediately, specialist. Yes, sir. Sarah accepted the folder, understanding the implicit message. As she turned to leave, Hayes added one final comment. The legacies of the Cold War are complex, specialist Reeves. Some protect us from dangers most will never know existed. Others remain locked away because they represent thresholds we swore never to cross again. His eyes held hers with knowing intensity. The question is, which legacy are you serving? The words resonated within Sarah as she left the office, her cover identity firmly in place as she moved through the administrative building toward her workstation. Hayes had provided critical intelligence, both about Project Echo and the opportunity to access it, but his motivations remained unclear. Was he facilitating her mission, setting a trap, or playing some deeper game rooted in Cold War loyalties? At her terminal, Sarah began entering inventory data, her actions completely ordinary to any observer. Through her workstation window, she could see Mitchell assembling his security team near the command building, preparing for the Echo Wing review. His movements were precise, his expression focused, a hunter methodically closing in on his prey. In the mess hall at lunch, Master Sergeant Donovan unexpectedly approached her table tray in hand. Mind if I join you, specialist? He asked, his usual gruffness, tempered with newfound respect. Sarah gestured to the empty seat across from her. Of course, Sergeant. Donovan sat his powerful frame, making the standard-issue chair seem inadequate. Hell of a call yesterday, he said without preamble. About the thermal barrier. Jenkins says it made all the difference. Sarah shrugged modestly. Just reporting what the instruments showed. Bullshit. Donovan's voice was low but intense. That wasn't instrument reading, that was shooter's knowledge. He leaned forward slightly. I've been training snipers for 15 years, Reeves. I know the difference between book learning and real experience. Sarah maintained her cover, neither confirming nor denying his assessment. I take my job seriously, Sergeant. That includes understanding the factors that affect performance. Donovan studied her with the evaluating gaze of a combat veteran who had learned to trust his instincts about people, instincts that had kept him alive through multiple deployments. Mitchell's got a hard-on for security at Echo Wing today, he said, changing subjects with deliberate casualness. Got my team running perimeter checks every 30 minutes. Overkill, if you ask me. Sarah understood immediately. Donovan was providing operational intelligence, telling her about security measures without directly compromising his duties. Maintenance tunnels are being swept hourly, Donovan continued, except the old section under the motor pool. Mitchell thinks they were sealed after the 1992 renovation. A slight emphasis on thinks conveyed the critical information. Sounds thorough, Sarah acknowledged, understanding the message. Donovan nodded. Just doing my job, specialist, like everyone else around here. He gathered his tray, then added quietly, whatever that job really is. Sarah finished her meal and moved with purposeful efficiency toward the motor pool, timing her movements to coincide with the changing of the guard at key checkpoints. She moved with confident purpose, carrying a clipboard that suggested official business. At the rear of the maintenance bay, past rows of Humvees and transport trucks, a supply closet stood unmarked except for a faded inventory number. Sarah entered, closing the door behind her. Behind a shelf of motor oil, a ventilation grate showed signs of recent access, subtle marks that most would overlook but were obvious to trained eyes. Sarah listened carefully, confirming no approach, then removed the grate with practiced efficiency. Beyond lay a narrow utility tunnel, part of the original base infrastructure from the Cold War era. According to Hayes, these tunnels had been officially sealed during renovations, but practically speaking had simply been removed from current schematics. Forgotten, but still accessible. Sarah moved silently through the dimly lit tunnel, her footsteps carefully placed to minimize sound. After 10 minutes of careful progress, she reached a junction where newer construction had partially blocked the original tunnel. The resulting gap was narrow but navigable for someone with her physical conditioning. Sarah squeezed through the opening, emerging in a section of tunnel that showed signs of more recent access. A vertical access shaft with metal rungs embedded in the concrete led upward. Sarah climbed carefully, reaching a locked maintenance hatch at the top. The lock was modern, an electronic keypad requiring authorized credentials. From a concealed pocket in her uniform, she retrieved a small electronic device, military-grade technology not available on the civilian market. She attached it to the keypad where microscopic probes established connection with the internal circuitry. The device cycled through algorithmic combinations, eventually finding the correct sequence. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Sarah raised the hatch a few inches, surveying the space above. She had emerged in a utility closet within the Echo Wing, exactly as the old schematics had indicated. Closing the hatch behind her, she took stock of her surroundings. A small ventilation duct provided visual access to the corridor outside, confirming no immediate security presence. Sarah checked her watch, 14:05 hours. Mitchell's security review would be fully underway, drawing attention to the main research areas. Her window of opportunity was narrow but sufficient if Hayes's intelligence was accurate. Moving with silent efficiency, Sarah exited the utility closet, her posture and expression conveying authorized purpose. The corridor was empty, security cameras positioned at standard intervals. The Echo Wing was smaller than she had anticipated, a self-contained research facility comprising approximately 5,000 square feet of laboratory and storage space. At the end of the main corridor, a reinforced door marked Secure Storage A7 beckoned. Unlike the other areas, this one featured modern security measures, a biometric scanner alongside the keycard reader. Sarah studied the security system, calculating options. A direct breach would trigger alarms alerting Mitchell immediately. Adjacent to the secure storage, a small office contained maintenance logs and technical documentation. Sarah quickly located the service records for Storage A7, confirming her theory. The Echo prototype underwent quarterly inspections, with the most recent completed just 2 weeks prior. More importantly, the logs contained the access credentials of the authorized technician, a senior engineer named Walters. From another concealed pocket, Sarah retrieved a small electronic device designed to disrupt power systems. Placing it on the junction box near the ceiling, she activated it remotely. The effect was immediate but subtle. Lights in the corridor flickered momentarily, and the electronic hum of equipment faltered. Sarah immediately moved to a wall-mounted emergency phone connecting to the security center. "Security, this is Specialist Reeves in Echo Wing. We've got a power fluctuation in Section A. Systems resetting." The response was immediate. "Acknowledged. All systems show green from here. Local issue only." "Roger that," Sarah replied. "I'll need to check Secure Storage A7 for equipment integrity. Requesting override authorization." There was a pause, security protocols being considered. Finally, verification code required. Sierra Tango 947. Sarah responded using the code from the maintenance logs. Another pause. Verified. Dr. Walters is with the inspection team. Override granted for systems check only. 5-minute window. Acknowledge. Commencing check now. The security panel on the door shifted from red to green, granting temporary access. Sarah entered swiftly, aware that her window was precisely as stated. 5 minutes before automatic security protocols would alert Mitchell to her presence. Inside, Secure Storage A7 was smaller than expected, approximately 400 square feet, with temperature and humidity control systems maintaining optimal preservation conditions. At the center stood a sealed glass case containing what appeared to be a remarkably ordinary device, roughly the size of a briefcase with Soviet-era design aesthetics. The Echo prototype looked unimpressive to untrained eyes, a relic of Cold War engineering rather than cutting-edge technology. But Sarah understood its significance immediately. The device utilized principles of aerosol distribution that were decades ahead of their time, with targeting capabilities that modern systems still couldn't match. Sarah worked quickly, photographing the prototype from multiple angles using a microcamera disguised as a standard military pen. The device captured high-resolution images while simultaneously scanning for electronic signatures and composition data, providing a complete technical profile without requiring physical access to the prototype itself. As she documented the Echo system, Sarah noticed something unexpected: modifications to the original Soviet design implemented well after the official termination of the project. American components had been integrated into the delivery system, with date stamps indicating work as recent as 2010. Project Echo hadn't been dormant after all. It had been actively maintained and upgraded despite official statements to the contrary. The question was why Sarah's stomach tightened with understanding. Hayes had been right. Echo had clearly been modified for modern deployment, its original Soviet design adapted to contemporary warfare. The implications sent a chill through her. Whoever wanted this technology wasn't preserving history, they were preparing to use it. Sarah completed her documentation with 30 seconds remaining in her authorized window. She exited the secure storage, ensuring the door resealed properly behind her. As she moved to return the way she had come, voices echoed from the main corridor. Mitchell's inspection team had finished the central laboratory and was moving toward her position. Sarah ducked into a side office, calculating options. The maintenance tunnels remained her best exfiltration route, but reaching them now required avoiding Mitchell's team. She scanned the office, noting a ceiling access panel for the building's ventilation system. A tight fit, but navigable. With practiced precision, Sarah moved a chair into position, climbed up, and accessed the ventilation system. Replacing the panel behind her, she navigated the confined space silently, using her mental map of the facility to locate a path back toward the utility closet and the tunnel access. Through ventilation grates, she caught glimpses of the inspection team below. Mitchell leading the group with focused intensity, Colonel Hayes following with more measured assessment, and various technical specialists examining equipment. Among them was a man she recognized from personnel files as Dr. Walters, the echo specialist, whose credentials she had utilized. Sarah paused above a grate when she heard Mitchell speaking directly below. "The prototype remains secure, Colonel. No evidence of tampering or unauthorized access." Hayes's response carried a note of skepticism. "Yet someone attempted to breach our systems yesterday, specifically targeting Echo Wing data. After 30 years of obscurity, why the sudden interest?" "That's what I intend to find out," Mitchell replied, his tone hardening. "And I have a strong suspect in mind." "Specialist Reeves," Hayes stated, not a question but a confirmation. "Her background is too perfect, her behavior too measured. Classic deep cover indicators." Hayes's response was thoughtful. "If she is what you suspect, the question remains, who is she working for? The Russians would have their own data from the original project. This feels like something else. Perhaps a third party became aware of Echo's potential applications," suggested Dr. Walters. "The delivery system could be adapted for numerous purposes beyond its original design. Precisely why it remains classified at the highest level," Mitchell affirmed. "I've increased surveillance on Reeves. If she makes a move toward Echo Wing, we'll know immediately." Sarah allowed herself a small smile at the irony. She was already inside Echo Wing, directly above Mitchell, as he planned her capture. But the conversation had confirmed important intelligence. Project Echo remained valuable for its potential applications, not its original purpose. The biological component had been neutralized, as Hayes claimed, but the delivery system represented technology still unmatched in modern weapons development. Continuing through the ventilation system, Sarah made her way back to the utility closet, descending through the maintenance hatch and resealing it behind her, erasing evidence of her entry. The tunnels provided secure exfiltration back to the motor pool, where she emerged through the supply closet, replacing the ventilation grate with careful precision. Sarah resumed her administrative duties, returning to her workstation with nothing in her appearance or demeanor to suggest anything beyond routine logistics work. But the intelligence she had gathered changed the operational calculus significantly. Project Echo represented adaptable technology with numerous potential applications, valuable to multiple parties beyond the original Cold War adversaries. The question remained, who was the second player attempting to access Echo, and for what purpose? As the workday drew to a close, Colonel Hayes passed through the administrative section, pausing briefly at Sarah's workstation. "Specialist Reeves, I'll need updated inventory figures for the armory tomorrow morning. 0700. "Yes, sir," Sarah responded with appropriate deference. Hayes's eyes held hers momentarily, communicating volumes beneath the mundane exchange. He knew she had accessed Echo Wing, whether through his own surveillance or intuition remained unclear. But instead of exposing her, he was establishing another private meeting. The game had become increasingly complex, with multiple players pursuing divergent objectives around the same classified technology. Sarah's mission parameters remained focused on verification, confirming what Project Echo contained and who was interested in it. But Hayes's involvement suggested deeper currents beneath the surface, Cold War loyalties and secrets that remained potent decades later. Darkness settled over Fort Shepherd as the base transitioned to night operations. Security floodlights cast harsh illumination across the parade ground, creating sharp contrast between light and shadow. In her quarters, Sarah Reeves sat on the edge of her bunk, outwardly composed, while her mind processed the intelligence she had gathered. Project Echo had evolved far beyond its Cold War origins. What had begun as a Soviet-American research initiative had been transformed into a precision assassination tool prepared for imminent deployment. The implications extended beyond her original mission parameters, creating a moral calculus that transcended ordinary operational considerations. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Sarah moved with a silent caution, positioning herself strategically before responding. Yes. Message from Colonel Hayes, came the voice of a young corporal. Report to command center at 2100 hours for night inventory verification. Acknowledged, Sarah replied through the closed door. She listened as the messenger's footsteps retreated down the hallway. The summons was unexpected. Night inventory procedures were uncommon outside of readiness exercises. Either Hayes was creating an opportunity for secure communication, or Mitchell was setting a trap using Hayes's authority as cover. At precisely 2100 hours, Sarah approached the command center, noting the increased security presence throughout the base. The command center itself featured additional checkpoints, with armed personnel verifying credentials with heightened scrutiny. Specialist Reeves reporting as ordered, Sarah informed the duty officer, presenting her identification. Colonel Hayes is waiting in briefing room C, the officer replied after confirming her authorization. Lieutenant Marshall will escort you. The escort was unusual. Another indication that standard protocols had been altered. Lieutenant Marshall led Sarah through the command center with professional detachment. His posture suggested combat experience, his gaze constantly scanning their surroundings with trained awareness. Briefing Room C was located in the secure section of the command center, typically used for classified operations planning. Marshall verified Sarah's credentials once more before opening the door, then departed without entering. Another deviation from standard procedure that raised Sarah's tactical awareness. Inside the briefing room, Colonel Hayes stood beside a digital display screen showing a topographical map of Fort Shepherd. Across from him, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell sat reviewing documents with focused intensity. Neither appeared surprised by Sarah's arrival, suggesting this meeting had been planned well in advance. Specialist Reeves reporting as ordered, sir, Sarah stated, maintaining her cover identity while assessing the situation. Hayes nodded acknowledgement. Close the door, Specialist. As Sarah complied, she noted additional details. The absence of recording equipment normally present in briefing rooms, the secured windows preventing external surveillance, and most significantly, the presence of Master Sergeant Donovan standing quietly in the corner, his expression unreadable. We can speak freely here, Hayes said once the door was secured. This room is swept for surveillance devices hourly. Mitchell looked up from his documents, his gaze locking onto Sarah with predatory focus. The question is whether we should be speaking freely in present company. The tension in the room crystallized around this statement. Mitchell's suspicions transformed into direct confrontation. Sarah maintained her administrative specialist demeanor, waiting for the situation to clarify before responding. Her pulse quickened, but years of training kept her outwardly calm as she assessed possible outcomes and escape routes. Hayes moved to the center of the room, his authority filling the space without needing to be asserted. Specialist Reeves, or whatever your actual designation may be, the time for covers and deniability has ended. Project Echo has been compromised at the highest levels, and we are facing an imminent security situation. Sarah assessed her options quickly. Direct denial would be pointless given the assembled personnel and Hayes' statement. Limited acknowledgement might provide operational advantage while determining the true purpose of this meeting. I'm not sure I understand, Colonel, she replied, her tone carefully balanced between confusion and professional respect. Mitchell slammed his hand on the table, patience exhausted. Enough games. We know you accessed Echo Wing yesterday and the backup servers today. We know you've been documenting the prototype and its modifications. His eyes narrowed. What we don't know is who you're working for and what your endgame is. Hayes raised a hand, silencing Mitchell's approach. We're not here to arrest or confront you, Specialist. We're here because in approximately 2 hours, Project Echo will be removed from this base by a specialized extraction team operating under classified orders from the Department of Defense. The statement shifted the operational dynamics completely. Sarah reassessed, recognizing that Hayes was providing critical intelligence rather than orchestrating an interrogation. Her tension didn't ease but transformed. This wasn't about her cover being blown. It was about Echo's imminent deployment. Those orders are falsified. Hayes continued activating the digital display to show security camera footage of a military transport approaching Fort Shepherd's main gate. The authorization codes are legitimate, but the mission parameters have been compromised. Echo is being removed for unauthorized deployment, not for the security concerns listed in the official documentation. Mitchell stood moving to the digital display to highlight key details of the approaching transport. 8-person team specialized equipment, scheduled arrival at 2300 hours. Their credentials identify them as a SOCOM security detail tasked with relocating Echo to Fort Detrick for enhanced protection. But you believe otherwise, Sarah stated, abandoning pretense as the situation clarified. Hayes nodded grimly. The relocation was authorized through channels I've spent 30 years navigating. I recognized irregularities that wouldn't be apparent to standard security protocols. He gestured to Master Sergeant Donovan, who stepped forward from his position in the corner. Sergeant Donovan's team intercepted communications suggesting the transport's actual destination isn't Fort Detrick. They're taking Echo off-grid for immediate deployment. Donovan spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the gravitas of combat experience. Encrypted transmission, military grade, but not using current protocols. Referenced delivery coordinates that match a location in Yemen. No authorized operations in that sector would require Echo's capabilities. Sarah processed this information against what she had learned from the backup servers. The modified delivery system, precision deployment of chemical agents. Hayes's expression hardened. You found the classified modifications. Yes, Echo has been adapted for targeted elimination of high-value individuals without collateral damage. The perfect assassination tool disguised as a Cold War relic. Mitchell studied Sarah with renewed intensity. Which brings us back to you. Who are you really, and what is your interest in Echo? The moment had arrived for calculated disclosure. Sarah felt a subtle shift within herself, the administrative specialist persona falling away as the trained operative emerged. She straightened slightly, her posture shifting subtly from subordinate to equal. I was sent to verify Echo's status and determine who was attempting to access it, she stated, her voice taking on a quiet authority previously concealed. Recent intelligence suggested unauthorized interest in the prototype, but the source couldn't be identified. Sent by whom? Mitchell pressed. By those who remember Project Echo's original purpose and the agreement made when Andrei Petrov defected? Sarah replied, her gaze meeting Hayes's directly. The technology was never to be weaponized again, by either side. Understanding dawned in Hayes's eyes, recognition of operational parameters that transcended ordinary military hierarchy. You're from the Oversight Division, the ones who monitor programs too classified for standard channels. Sarah neither confirmed nor denied this assessment, but her silence was answer enough. Hayes turned to Mitchell and Donovan, his decision made. Regardless of Specialist Reeves's actual affiliation, we share a common objective, preventing Echo from leaving this base for unauthorized deployment. His voice carried the weight of command built over decades of service. Mitchell, what's our tactical situation? Mitchell shifted to operational assessment with professional efficiency. The extraction team has legitimate credentials and authorization codes. Standard security protocols can't prevent their access without direct countermanding orders from the Joint Chiefs, which would take hours to obtain through proper channels. By which time Echo would be gone, Hayes concluded. What about base security assets? Limited options, Mitchell replied grimly. Most personnel are unaware of Echo's significance and would follow legitimate appearing orders. My security team consists of 24 trusted operators, but directly opposing a SOCOM team with proper documentation would constitute mutiny under military law. Hayes nodded, processing these constraints. Donovan, the Master Sergeant, stepped forward, his tactical mind already formulating options. My sniper team is conducting night training exercises on the Eastern Range. 6 operators, all combat experienced. They're positioned away from standard security patrols and could be repositioned without attracting attention. Not enough for direct confrontation, Mitchell observed. No, Donovan agreed, but enough to control key access points if we can create legitimate cause for a security lockdown. Hayes turned to Sarah, strategic calculation evident in his expression. That's where you come in. Your presence here is outside normal operational parameters. You have resources and options that circumvent standard military protocols. The implication was clear. Hayes was requesting her direct intervention, recognizing that her operational authority likely exceeded his own in certain domains. Sarah felt the weight of the moment. This was no longer about verification, but active countermeasures against unauthorized deployment. I can create a security situation that would justify temporary lockdown, she acknowledged, but it would mean revealing capabilities that would compromise my cover permanently. Your cover is already compromised, Mitchell stated bluntly. The question is whether preventing Echo's deployment is worth exposing your true role. Sarah met his gaze steadily. The deployment of Echo represents a threshold we cannot allow to be crossed. The consequences would extend far beyond this operation. Hayes nodded, understanding the significance of her request. Mitchell will provide clearance and ensure you're undisturbed. He checked his watch. The extraction team arrives in less than 2 hours. Whatever you're planning needs to be implemented quickly. Donovan, Sarah said, turning to the master sergeant, can your team secure the approach to Echo Wing without appearing to directly challenge the extraction team's authority? Donovan considered for a moment, then nodded. Night training exercise includes tactical positioning drills. I can place my people at key junctions with legitimate training parameters. Do it, Hayes ordered. Mitchell, coordinate with base security to ensure they don't interfere with Donovan's team movements. Cite the Eagle Sharp competition evaluations as justification. The impromptu team dispersed with military efficiency, each member clear on their role in the developing operation. Sarah moved alongside Mitchell toward the communications center. Their previous adversarial relationship temporarily set aside in service of the immediate objective. For what it's worth, Mitchell said, as they navigated the secure corridors, I still don't trust you, but Hayes does, and that counts for something. Sarah acknowledged this with a slight nod. Trust isn't required for operational success, just clarity of purpose. The communications center hummed with the quiet efficiency of military technology staffed by technicians monitoring Fort Shepherd's extensive networks. Mitchell approached the duty officer, his authority clearing the necessary access without question. Specialist Reeves needs 15 minutes on the secure communications array. Priority authorization, my clearance. The room is to remain clear until she completes her task. The duty officer acknowledged the order without hesitation, instructing his personnel to vacate the secure communications section. Within moments, Sarah had the facility to herself, the door secured behind her. Working with practiced efficiency, Sarah accessed the high-security communication system, bypassing standard military protocols to establish a connection on frequencies not monitored by conventional security measures. Her fingers moved across the specialized equipment with the confidence of extensive training, encoding a message that would be received by assets outside normal military command structure. The message was brief but comprehensive. The situation at Fort Shepherd, the imminent, unauthorized removal of Project Echo, and the tactical assets available to prevent it. She included Hayes's involvement in assessment, providing context for the unprecedented intervention she was requesting. Transmission complete. Sarah initiated secondary protocols, activating contingency resources positioned near Fort Shepherd as part of her mission parameters. These assets had been placed on standby when she began her assignment, prepared for scenarios exactly like the one now unfolding. With communication established and resources mobilized, Sarah implemented the final component of her plan, a carefully calibrated intrusion into Fort Shepherd's perimeter security network. The breach would appear to originate from outside the base, triggering automatic protocols that would restrict all vehicle movement until the threat was assessed and cleared. Sarah completed these tasks within the allocated 15 minutes, leaving no trace of her actions within systems that would be subsequently examined. When Mitchell returned, she had resumed her administrative specialist demeanor, though both now recognized it as the operational disguise it had always been. It's done, she informed him simply. Mitchell nodded, professional respect evident despite his lingering suspicion. What should we expect? A security response that will justify lockdown protocols without raising questions about its true purpose, Sarah replied. The extraction team will be delayed without direct confrontation. They exited the communications center, moving with purposeful efficiency toward the command building, where Hayes would be coordinating the overall response. As they crossed the parade ground, alarm sirens suddenly blared across the base, the distinctive pattern indicating perimeter breach in multiple sectors. Fort Shepherd transformed instantly from evening routine to high alert. Security teams deployed to predetermined positions, vehicle checkpoints activated at all junctions, and floodlights intensified to maximum illumination. Over the tactical communication network, orders flowed with practiced precision as the base implemented containment protocols designed to secure all critical assets during external threat. Sarah and Mitchell arrived at the command center as Hayes was issuing coordination instructions to the response teams. The colonel acknowledged their arrival with a brief nod, continuing his command role without interruption. Perimeter sensors indicate multiple intrusion attempts at the northeast and west boundaries, he informed them during a momentary pause. Security teams are responding according to protocol. All vehicle movement has been suspended pending threat assessment. Mitchell exchanged a knowing glance with Sarah, understanding that this breach was her creation rather than an actual security threat. Estimated containment time, minimum 2 hours for full perimeter verification. Hayes replied loud enough for others in the command center to hear. Then lowering his voice for their ears only, the extraction team has been directed to secure their transport at the main gate until the all-clear is issued. Standard protocol impossible for them to challenge without revealing their true urgency. Sarah nodded slightly, acknowledging the effectiveness of the delay tactic. Donovan's team, in position near Echo Wing, Hayes confirmed, conducting night visibility exercises that happened to cover all approach routes to the storage facility. An hour into the containment operation, a communication officer approached Hayes with evident concern. "Sir, the SOCOM team leader is requesting direct communication with you. He's citing national security protocols that would override our containment procedures." Hayes accepted the secure handset with the practiced calm of a career officer. "Colonel Hayes speaking." The voice that responded carried the hard authority of Special Operations Command. "Colonel, this is Major Wilson, SOCOM Extraction Alpha. We have priority orders to secure and transport a classified asset from your facility. These orders supersede your current security protocols." "I understand your position, Major," Hayes replied with perfect professional courtesy. "However, base regulations require complete perimeter security before any high-value asset can be transferred. I cannot override these protocols without direct authorization from Central Command." "My orders carry that authorization, Colonel Wilson responded, tension evident in his tone. "Check verification code Sierra Echo 973. Hayes signaled to a communications officer who verified the code through appropriate channels. After a moment, the officer nodded confirmation. The code was legitimate, authorizing override of standard security measures. Hayes faced a critical decision point. Continuing to delay would now constitute direct disobedience of verified orders. Before he could respond, Sarah moved to his side, speaking in tones too low for others to hear. "I need 5 more minutes. My assets are almost in position." Hayes made his decision, returning to the communication. "Major Wilson, your authorization is confirmed. However, I must inform you that the security breach appears to be specifically targeting the Echo Wing sector. As a precaution, I've ordered specialized security measures for that facility. I'll meet you personally at the main gate to provide escort." The response was immediate and sharp. "Negative, Colonel. My team will proceed directly to the objective. Your escort is not required." Hayes' expression hardened slightly. "Major, this is my base. My protocol requires my presence for access to classified storage facilities regardless of your authorization level. I will meet you at the main gate in 10 minutes. Hayes out." He terminated the communication before Wilson could respond, turning to Mitchell and Sarah with grim determination. "They're pushing hard for immediate access. That's not standard procedure even for priority transfers." "Because it's not a standard transfer," Mitchell confirmed. "Whatever they're planning requires Echo to be removed tonight before anyone can question their authorization." Sarah checked her watch, calculating timing. "I need to get to Echo Wing immediately. My countermeasures will be in place within minutes." Hayes nodded. "Mitchell, provide escort and clearance. I'll continue delaying Wilson's team at the main gate." He fixed Sarah with a penetrating gaze. "Whatever you're planning, and make it count. This is our only opportunity." Sarah acknowledged with a slight nod before following Mitchell from the command center. They moved across the base with urgent purpose, using secondary routes to avoid security checkpoints that might question their destination during the containment operation. Near Echo Wing, they encountered Donovan's sniper team positioned at strategic locations, their presence disguised as training exercises, but their tactical positioning unmistakable to experienced eyes. Donovan himself approached as they neared the facility entrance. "Perimeter is secure," he reported with professional efficiency. All approaches covered communication established with base security to prevent friendly fire incidents. Mitchell nodded approval. "How many of your people know the actual situation?" "Just my team leaders," Donovan replied. "The others think it's an unannounced readiness drill. They'll follow orders without question." Sarah assessed the tactical positioning with experienced eyes. "Your people are well-trained, Sergeant, but we're facing SOCOM operators with legitimate authorization codes. If this becomes a direct confrontation, the legal and career implications would be severe." "Some principles matter more than careers," Donovan responded. "Hayes says Echo can't leave this base tonight. That's good enough for me." Sarah felt a surge of respect for the sergeant. In a world of shifting loyalties and ambiguous morality, Donovan's straightforward commitment to doing what he believed right was refreshing. She nodded appreciation before turning to Mitchell. "I need access to Echo storage immediately." Mitchell provided the necessary clearance, escorting Sarah through multiple security checkpoints, so into the heart of Echo Wing. In the secure storage area, Sarah moved directly to the containment unit housing the Project Echo prototype. "What are you planning?" Mitchell asked, watching as Sarah removed specialized equipment from concealed locations within her uniform. "Insurance," she replied, simply beginning to work on the prototype with practiced precision. Her movements were economical and confident, revealing training far beyond administrative specialization. Mitchell observed with growing understanding. "You're not disabling it, you're tagging it." Sarah continued her work without pausing. "Passive transponder, virtually undetectable by standard scanning equipment. If Echo leaves this facility, it can be tracked anywhere on the planet." "And if tracking isn't enough," Mitchell pressed. Sarah met his gaze briefly, her expression revealing nothing. "Then more direct measures become necessary." Before Mitchell could respond, his tactical radio activated with Hayes' voice tension evident despite the professional tone. "Mitchell, be advised. Wilson's team has bypassed main gate security using override authorization. They're moving toward Echo Wing with full tactical gear. ETA 5 minutes." Mitchell acknowledged the warning, turning to Sarah with renewed urgency. "Time's up. Whatever you're doing needs to be completed now." Sarah worked with increased speed, finalizing the modifications to the prototype. "Almost done. 30 more seconds." Outside the storage facility, they could hear Donovan organizing his team for potential confrontation, their positions adjusting to address the approaching threat. The situation was escalating toward direct conflict between legitimate military units, precisely the scenario they had hoped to avoid. Sarah completed her work on the prototype, concealing all evidence of tampering with professional skill. "Done. Now we need to create distance between ourselves and Echo. If Wilson's team believes we've tampered with the prototype, they'll take immediate countermeasures." Mitchell nodded understanding, leading Sarah from the secure storage toward the facility exit. Through tactical communications, they could track the extraction team's progress, moving with practiced efficiency through the base, bypassing security checkpoints with their override authorization. Near the Echo Wing entrance, they encountered Donovan's team establishing defensive positions. The master sergeant approached, his expression reflecting the gravity of their situation. "Wilson's team is 2 minutes out, moving in tactical formation. 8 operators fully equipped for combat operations." Mitchell assessed their options with experienced calculation. "We can't directly oppose them without creating a firefight on a U.S. military base." "No," Sarah agreed, feeling the tension of the moment pressing down on her. "But we can ensure they understand that Echo is being monitored at the highest levels." She turned to Donovan. "Your team should stand down, Sergeant. Make it clear you're conducting training exercises only." Donovan frowned, professional pride warring with tactical reality. "Ma'am, if we stand down, they'll take Echo without opposition." "They'll take it regardless," Sarah replied with quiet authority. "The question is whether American soldiers end up shooting each other in the process." She placed a hand briefly on Donovan's arm, a gesture of respect between professionals. "Trust that this isn't the end of the operation, just the first phase." Understanding dawned in Donovan's eyes. He nodded sharply, moving to reposition his team to non-confrontational postures while maintaining tactical awareness of the situation. Sarah turned to Mitchell. You should return to the command center. Your presence here when Wilson arrives would create unnecessary complications. Mitchell studied her with renewed assessment. And you? I have a different exit strategy, she replied simply. Recognition flashed in Mitchell's eyes, understanding that Sarah's operational parameters extended beyond standard military structure. He nodded acceptance, then surprised her by offering his hand. Whoever you really are, you've earned my respect today. Sarah accepted the handshake, a brief moment of professional acknowledgement between former adversaries now aligned by common purpose. As Mitchell departed toward the command center, Sarah moved in the opposite direction, navigating through the facility with the confident precision of someone intimately familiar with both the layout and security protocols. Outside Echo Wing, she could hear Wilson's team arriving, their movement disciplined and purposeful as they secured the perimeter before entering the facility. Sarah avoided direct contact, utilizing service corridors and maintenance access to create distance between herself and the extraction team. Near the base perimeter, in a section temporarily unmonitored due to the security breach response, Sarah accessed her emergency exfiltration route, a carefully prepared contingency for situations exactly like the one now unfolding. Within minutes, she had cleared the base boundaries without triggering additional security responses, moving toward a predetermined rendezvous point in the surrounding desert. Half a mile beyond the perimeter, a nondescript vehicle waited in the shadow of a rock formation, its presence concealed from routine surveillance. As Sarah approached, the driver's side window lowered to reveal an older man, mid-70s with the weathered features and alert eyes of a career intelligence operative. Cutting it close, Athena, he commented as she entered the vehicle. Situations evolved, Victor, Sarah replied, her demeanor now fully aligned with her true operational identity. Echo is being transported off base by a SOCOM team with falsified deployment orders. Victor Sullivan, once a legendary CIA operative specializing in Soviet operations, now officially retired but still active in the shadows, nodded understanding. Tracking device activated and transmitting. We'll know exactly where they take it. Sullivan started the vehicle, moving away from Fort Shepherd with the careful precision of someone avoiding attention. Hayes figured it out, didn't he? Recognized you from Berlin. Sarah gazed out the window at the military base receding behind them, its floodlights illuminating the desert night. Yes, but he chose to help rather than expose the operation. Old cold warriors, Sullivan mused with something approaching respect. They remember when certain boundaries were clear even between enemies, when we understood that some weapons crossed lines that neither side should want crossed. Sarah's expression remained controlled, but her tone carried unexpected emotion. He said the most dangerous weapons aren't always the ones that kill, but the ones that tempt us to cross lines we swore never to cross again. Wisdom earned through experience, Sullivan agreed, his voice hardening with conviction. Which is why we're going to make sure Echo never reaches its destination. The desert night surrounded them with vast emptiness, stars brilliant in the clear Arizona sky. Sullivan drove with the relaxed confidence of a man who had navigated more dangerous terrain in his extensive career, the vehicle maintaining a careful distance from main highways to avoid potential intercepts. Inside the vehicle, Sarah monitored the tracking device she had planted on Project Echo, watching as the extraction team moved steadily away from Fort Shepherd. The signal indicated the SOCOM unit was heading southwest, following secondary roads toward what appeared to be Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, a logical departure point for classified technology being transported cross-country. They'll fly it out tonight, Sullivan observed, reading the tactical situation with decades of experience. Probably have a transport already waiting. Once Echo is airborne, our options become significantly limited. Sarah nodded agreement, her mind calculating possibilities and contingencies. We have assets at Davis-Monthan. Limited, Sullivan replied. One maintenance technician, no direct access to secure hangars or flight operations. We're not positioned for intercept there. Sarah studied the tracking data with focused intensity, noting the extraction team's route and speed. They're moving cautiously, avoiding main highways, changing direction periodically to detect potential pursuit. Professional counter-surveillance techniques. Sarah's satellite phone activated with a secure incoming transmission. She established connection, listening intently to the encoded message before responding with brief acknowledgement. Our asset at Fort Shepherd confirms Wilson's team removed Echo without incident, she informed Sullivan. Hayes facilitated the transfer once it became clear direct opposition wasn't viable. Mitchell has maintained the security response protocols to provide cover for all unusual activities tonight. Sullivan processed this information with the calculating precision of a veteran intelligence operative. Hayes is protecting his people while maintaining plausible deniability. Smart move. When questions come from above, he can truthfully report that he followed all proper protocols despite the security situation. He survived 30 years in the shadows, Sarah observed, feeling a growing respect for the colonel. He understands how the game is played. Sullivan adjusted their route, taking a barely visible access road that paralleled the extraction team's projected path. The question remains, who authorized Echo's removal and reactivation? Those orders came through legitimate channels with proper authentication codes. Someone with access to the highest levels of classified operations, Sarah confirmed. Someone who remembers Project Echo's potential and sees application in today's asymmetric warfare environment. Sullivan's weathered face hardened with disapproval. Echo was designed for a different era under different rules of engagement. Its deployment now would violate every international convention on chemical weapons, which is why it's being moved covertly with falsified mission parameters. Sarah replied, whoever is behind this understands the legal and political implications. They're creating distance between the authorization and the actual deployment. The tracking signal suddenly changed direction, the extraction team diverting from their expected route toward Davis-Monthan. Sarah studied the new trajectory with focused attention, feeling a spike of adrenaline as she realized the implications. They're heading northwest now, not toward Davis-Monthan. Sullivan frowned, reassessing the operational picture. Alternative extraction point. There's an abandoned airstrip from the Cold War era about 60 miles in that direction. Used for classified research flights in the 1980s, officially decommissioned, but maintained as an emergency landing site. Sarah checked satellite imagery on her secure device, confirming Sullivan's assessment. Perfect for covert transport. Isolated, unmarked on civilian maps, but still operational for military aircraft. She calculated distances and timing. If that's their destination, they'll arrive in approximately 40 minutes. Sullivan adjusted their route accordingly, maintaining parallel tracking without direct pursuit. Our options are limited once they reach the airstrip. If they have air transport waiting, Echo will be beyond our reach within hours. Sarah's expression remained controlled, but her tone carried the quiet intensity of absolute conviction. Echo cannot be deployed under any circumstances. Sullivan glanced at her briefly, understanding the full implications of that statement. The tracking device will allow us to locate it later. If there is a later, Sarah replied. Once Echo reaches its deployment location, the time frame becomes compressed. We need to intercept before that happens. Sullivan nodded, his decades of operational experience informing his assessment. Direct confrontation with a SOCOM team is beyond our current capabilities. We're talking about 8 highly trained operators with full tactical equipment. We don't need to defeat them, Sarah clarified. We just need to prevent Echo from leaving U.S. soil long enough for proper countermeasures to be implemented. Her satellite phone activated again with another incoming transmission. Sarah connected, listening intently before responding with coded acknowledgement. She felt a surge of hope. The contingency plans were activating. Assets are converging on the airstrip, she informed Sullivan. 3 operatives with tactical capability, ETA 20 minutes, plus air surveillance positioning to monitor the situation. Sullivan brought their vehicle to a stop 2 miles from the airstrip, positioning it behind a natural rock formation that provided both concealment and elevated observation. From this vantage point, they could monitor the approach roads while remaining invisible to casual surveillance. Sarah retrieved specialized equipment from concealed compartments within the vehicle, night vision optics, communications gear, and a compact rifle case that Sullivan opened with practiced efficiency. Inside lay a disassembled Macmillan TAC-50 sniper rifle, a weapon capable of extreme long-distance precision. Just in case, Sullivan explained as he began assembling the rifle with the methodical movements of decades of experience. Contingency planning was always your strong suit. Sarah positioned the night vision equipment, establishing surveillance of the airstrip and surrounding terrain. The facility appeared abandoned at first glance. A single runway with minimal supporting structures all dark against the desert landscape. But her trained observation detected subtle signs of recent activity. Tire tracks, disturbed dust patterns, and most significantly, the almost imperceptible outline of a military transport aircraft positioned at the far end of the runway. Guang's 130 variant engines, cold but prepped for rapid startup, she reported. No visible personnel, but likely security positions established at key points. Sullivan completed assembly of the TAC-50 mounting a specialized night-capable scope before taking position beside Sarah. His movements, despite his age, reflected the precision of a lifetime operator whose skills remained intact. Our people know to maintain observation only unless Echo's departure becomes imminent, he confirmed. Direct confrontation is last resort. The tracking signal showed the extraction team approaching the final access road to the airstrip. Sarah activated her secure communication link, connecting with the other operatives positioned around the perimeter. Target approaching from Northeast Access Road. Maintain observation positions. Report any movement at the aircraft. Acknowledgements came from 3 separate positions. Experienced operatives establishing perimeter coverage with minimal communications. The tactical situation was crystallizing. Echo would soon arrive, transfer to the waiting aircraft would follow, and departure would be expedited to minimize exposure. Through night vision equipment, Sarah detected vehicle movement on the access road, the distinctive profile of military transport approaching with tactical discipline. The extraction team had reached their destination, Project Echo, now minutes away from potential departure. Sullivan maintained his position at the rifle scope, trained on the approach area with steady precision. Despite his age, his hands remained rock steady, his breathing controlled with the discipline of a lifetime marksman. If this becomes kinetic focus on the aircraft, not personnel, he advised quietly. Disable the transport without direct engagement with Wilson's team if possible. Sarah acknowledged with slight nod, understanding the strategic calculus. Preventing Echo's transport remained the primary objective, while avoiding American casualties represented a critical constraint. The extraction team's vehicles entered the airstrip perimeter, moving directly toward the waiting aircraft with practiced efficiency. Through magnified optics, Sarah could identify Major Wilson directing the operation, his team executing a security sweep before beginning transfer procedures. Aircraft powering up, came a report through Sarah's communications link. Pre-flight sequence initiated. The situation was accelerating toward direct intervention. Sarah calculated options rapidly, assessing the narrowing window for non-kinetic solutions. Her pulse quickened, but her mind remained clear, focused on the objective rather than the mounting tension. Our priority remains preventing Echo from departing U.S. soil, she reminded the observation team. Maintain positions and prepare for potential disabling operation on my command. As the extraction team secured the perimeter, activity at the aircraft increased, preparation for immediate departure once Echo was loaded. Wilson's operators moved with professional precision, establishing defensive positions around the transport vehicles while preparing for the critical transfer. Sarah's satellite phone activated with an unexpected transmission. She connected, listening intently before responding with evident surprise. Understood. Implementing immediately. Sullivan glanced at her questioningly, noting the change in her demeanor. Stand down order. She explained, her expression reflecting controlled amazement. Direct from JSOC command, authentication verified at highest levels. Wilson's team is being recalled, mission aborted. Sullivan's experience prevented immediate acceptance. Verification. Triple channel confirmation, proper authorization codes, Sarah confirmed. Someone at the top just pulled the plug on Echo's deployment. Through their surveillance equipment, they observed the unmistakable signs of an operation suddenly terminated. Wilson receiving communication, his posture reflecting surprise and confusion before issuing new orders to his team. The aircraft's engines, which had begun warming up, powered down again. Hayes, Sullivan concluded with quiet certainty, he didn't just let Echo go. He activated his own contingencies. Sarah nodded agreement, feeling a surge of respect for the colonel. She watched as the extraction team reorganized for return transport rather than continuation. He has connections that transcend ordinary chain of command. Old Cold Warriors looking out for each other, even decades later. Sullivan lowered his rifle slightly, maintaining observation, but acknowledging the changed tactical situation. The question is whether this is temporary or permanent. Echo still exists, still represents the same deployment potential. True, Sarah acknowledged, but tonight's operation has exposed vulnerabilities in the authorization chain. Whoever was orchestrating Echo's reactivation now knows they're being watched at the highest levels. They maintained observation as Wilson's team secured Project Echo in their transport vehicles and departed the airstrip, their movement now directed back toward Fort Shepherd rather than toward deployment. The aircraft remained in position, its crew apparently awaiting new orders following the mission aboard. Sarah contacted the observation team, issuing updated instructions reflecting the changed situation. Maintain a surveillance of Echo during return transport. Confirm delivery to Fort Shepherd, secure storage. With the immediate crisis averted, Sarah and Sullivan repositioned to their vehicle, maintaining tactical awareness while preparing for extraction from their observation post. This isn't over, Sullivan observed as they secured their equipment. Echo still exists. The technology remains viable. Someone with enough authority tried to deploy it once. They may try again. Sarah nodded agreement, her expression reflecting the weight of operations that span decades rather than hours. Which is why our mission continues. Echo represents a category of weapon that should never leave secured storage, regardless of perceived strategic advantage. Sullivan started the vehicle, navigating away from the observation point with careful attention to counter-surveillance procedures. Hayes understands that. He was there at the beginning, saw what Echo was designed to do. Yes, Sarah agreed, her thoughts returning to the colonel who had recognized her at Fort Shepherd and chosen to help rather than hinder. Some technologies create moral debts that transcend ordinary duty. Hayes repaid his tonight. As they drove into the desert night, Sarah maintained connection with the observation team tracking Echo's return to Fort Shepherd. The immediate crisis had been averted, but the larger strategic situation remained unresolved. Project Echo continued to exist, its potential deployment only temporarily prevented by the intervention of individuals operating outside normal chains of command. 3 days later, Fort Shepherd had returned to normal operations. The security breach had been officially attributed to sensor malfunction. The presence of the SOCOM team explained as routine transfer of classified materials, and all personnel had resumed their regular duties with no official acknowledgement of the events that had actually transpired. In the officers' mess, Colonel Robert Hayes sat alone, reviewing documents with the focused attention that had characterized his entire career. At 62, with retirement approaching within months, he carried the quiet authority of a man who had seen the full spectrum of classified operations across decades of service. His solitude was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, who placed a cup of coffee on the table before taking the seat across from Hayes. Project Echo has been reclassified, Mitchell reported without preamble, his voice low enough to ensure privacy. New security protocols restricted access, limited to direct presidential authorization only. Whatever you did worked. Hayes nodded slightly, neither confirming nor denying Mitchell's assessment. Sometimes the system corrects itself when proper information reaches the right people. Mitchell studied his superior with newfound respect. In the aftermath of Echo's aborted removal, he had recognized dimensions to Hayes's influence that transcended ordinary military hierarchy, connections to individuals who operated at levels few officers ever encountered. In Specialist Reeves, Mitchell asked the question, carrying multiple layers of meaning. Transferred to Fort Belvoir, effective immediately. Hayes replied, his expression revealing nothing. Administrative reassignment, all proper documentation in order. Mitchell nodded understanding. Sarah Reeves, whatever her true identity, had vanished from Fort Shepherd as completely as she had appeared 3 years earlier, her mission concluded without official acknowledgement. She wasn't what she appeared to be, Mitchell observed, the statement requiring no response. Hayes took a measured sip of coffee before replying. Few of us are when our duties require otherwise. He met Mitchell's gaze directly. You performed admirably during a complex situation, Colonel. That won't be forgotten when my recommendation for your promotion goes forward next month. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Master Sergeant Donovan, who approached their table with the confident bearing of a career non-commissioned officer. Colonel, the qualification results from yesterday's session are complete. Jenkins broke the base record again. Hayes nodded acknowledgement. Excellent. Your training methods continue to produce exceptional results, Sergeant. Donovan hesitated momentarily, then added with careful neutrality. We're down one target designator from the inventory. filed the appropriate loss documentation this morning. Hayes met the sergeant's gaze with understanding that transcended the mundane equipment issue. Ensure the paperwork is processed properly. These things happen during training exercises. Yes, sir, Donovan replied, the brief exchange communicating volumes beneath its surface. Like Mitchell, Donovan had demonstrated loyalty beyond ordinary duty during the Echo situation. Loyalty that Hayes clearly intended to remember and protect. As Donovan departed, Hayes returned to his documents, but Mitchell lingered, a final question still unresolved. Sir, Project Echo, was it really worth the risk we took, opposing legitimate orders, potentially ending careers, if things had gone differently? Hayes considered the question with the thoughtfulness of a boss who had made similar calculations throughout a lifetime of classified service. He recalled the moment in East Berlin, surrounded by Stasi agents, when 7 perfect shots from an unknown ally had saved his team. He remembered the prototype Echo device designed to deliver death with unprecedented precision and the modifications that had transformed it into a modern assassination tool. There are weapons that kill the body, Mitchell, he finally replied, and there are weapons that kill something more fundamental, our humanity, our moral boundaries. Echo represents the latter. Once we cross certain thresholds, we can never fully return. He met Mitchell's gaze directly. Some lines must be maintained regardless of the authorization behind crossing them. Mitchell nodded slowly, understanding the moral calculus Hayes had applied. And Specialist Reeves, was she what I think she was? Hayes smiled slightly, the expression of a man remembering events decades past. In 1989, my team was extracted from East Berlin under impossible circumstances. 7 perfect shots from a position no sniper should have been able to establish, much less maintain accuracy from. He paused, memories of that frozen night clearly visible in his expression. The shooter's designation was Athena, part of a program called Artemis that officially never existed. Female operators with specialized training deployed for operations too sensitive for standard teams. Mitchell processed this revelation with professional control, understanding its significance. Berlin was 33 years ago, sir. Reeves couldn't have been more than a child then. The original Athena, no, Hayes acknowledged, but programs like Artemis don't simply end when the political situation changes. They evolve, adapt, continue under different designations with new personnel carrying forward the same operational principles. The implication was clear. Sarah Reeves represented the continuation of classified programs dating back to the Cold War, her presence at Fort Shepherd part of ongoing oversight that operated outside normal military structure. Will we see her again? Mitchell asked. Hayes shook his head slightly. Unlikely, but others like her will continue the same mission, ensuring that technologies developed in one era don't create catastrophes in another. He gathered his documents, preparing to depart. That's the real legacy of our service, Mitchell. Not the medals or promotions, but the disasters prevented that no one will ever know about. As Hayes stood, Mitchell rose as well, offering a respectful nod to the older officer. It's been an honor serving with you, sir. Likewise, Colonel, Hayes replied with genuine appreciation. And remember, the most important victories are the ones that never appear in any record. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in a nondescript office building in Northern Virginia, Sarah Reeves, now using yet another identity, reviewed operation reports with Victor Sullivan. Their workspace contained no military insignia, no official designations, nothing that would connect them to the classified oversight function they had performed for decades. Echo has been properly secured, Sullivan confirmed, studying data on a specialized terminal. Hayes' connections reached even higher than we anticipated. Presidential-level reclassification access restricted beyond normal protocols. Sarah nodded approval. Hayes understood the implications from the beginning. He recognized Echo for what it truly represented, not just a weapon, but a moral threshold that required constant vigilance. Sullivan leaned back in his chair, the movement emphasizing his age but not diminishing the sharp intelligence in his expression. Veterans of certain conflicts understand boundaries that others never learned. They remember when even enemies could agree that certain lines shouldn't be crossed, not because they couldn't be, but because no one would benefit from the world that would follow. A distinction worth preserving. Sarah agreed, her thoughts returning to Fort Shepherd and the colonel who had recognized her true purpose. Hayes and men like him are becoming rare. Those who understand firsthand why certain technologies were deemed too dangerous to deploy. I received word about your next deployment, Sullivan said, interrupting her thoughts. Routine verification operation, nothing as complex as Echo. Sarah nodded, accepting the natural transition from one mission to the next. This was the rhythm of her life, moving from shadow to shadow, ensuring that the boundaries established through bitter experience weren't crossed by those who hadn't learned their importance. Before you go, Sullivan added, sliding a folder across the desk, this came through secure channels, addressed specifically to Athena. Sarah opened the folder, finding a single handwritten note inside. The message was brief, written in a steady hand that reflected decades of military discipline. Some victories are measured by what doesn't happen. RH. She allowed herself a small smile. Hayes's final acknowledgement of their shared mission, a connection between veterans of different generations, but the same essential conflict. The note contained no classified information, nothing that could be traced or compromised, yet it conveyed volumes to those who understood its context. Unusual for Hayes to risk even this much contact, Sullivan observed. He's retiring next month, Sarah replied, his final statement on matters that will never appear in his official record. Sullivan nodded, understanding. The old guard passing the torch, making sure you know you're not alone in the shadows. As she left the nondescript office building, Sarah Reeves blended seamlessly into the Washington crowd. Another anonymous professional in a city full of them. To casual observers, nothing distinguished her from thousands of others moving through the capital streets. They couldn't see the invisible weight she carried, the knowledge of technologies and capabilities that remained secured in classified facilities, protected by the vigilance of those who understood their true implications. The legacy of honor wasn't found in medals or public recognition, but in disasters prevented that would never appear in any record. The true measure of service in a world where the most dangerous conflicts often remained invisible to those they protected. In the shadows between official history and classified reality, Sarah Reeves continued her vigilance, carrying forward a mission that had begun in the coldest days of a different era, but remained essential in a world still grappling with the moral implications of its most destructive technologies. Some wars never truly ended, some guardians never ceased their watch, and some boundaries remained secured not by locks or protocols, but by the determined vigilance of those who understood their true importance. The cold warriors, whose most important victories would never be celebrated except in the silence of threats that never materialized and deployments that never occurred. In that silence lay the true legacy of honor preserved by those who served without recognition in defense of principles that transcended the conflicts of any single era.